It appears that, rightfully so, Norse mythology is getting its fair share of the spotlight now, as it should. Especially its tale of the end, Ragnarok. Yes, everyone's familiar with it. Thor fights a giant snake, a giant wolf is released, the world tree burns, but how many of you actually know the story? Or how it was detailed for the later Norse people, mainly after the Christianization of the Norwegian areas. Yes, that is detailed in something called the Volsupa, a story where Odin raises a soothsayer and begins to question her about things to come. Now, there are many stanzas before what I'm about to read you. In fact, I'm starting with stanza 27 and pretty much going to the end, because that's what details Ragnarok. But there are a lot of interesting details. It's both the creation myth and the end time myth wrapped into one. Let's begin with stanza 27. I know where Heimdall hid his ear, under the heaven-bright holy branches of Yggdrasil. I see a river that feeds the muddy waterfall, where Odin's eye hides. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? I sat alone when the Ancient One came to me, Odin of the Aesir, and he looked into my eye. What do you seek from me, Odin? Why do you seek me, Odin? Odin, I know where you hid your eye, in the famous waters of the well of Mimir. But Mimir can drink every morning from those waters, where your own eye drowns. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? Odin opened my eyes to rings and necklaces. In exchange he got wisdom and prophecy. I saw more and more, looking out over all the worlds. I saw Valkyries come from far away, ready to ride to the home of the gods. Skuld held a shield, and Skogul another. Gun, Hild, Gundel, and Gyrskogul. Now the Valkyries are counted, ready to ride to the earth. The Valkyries. I saw Balder, the bloodied victim, Odin's son, resigned to his fate. There stood the mistletoe, growing slender and fair, high above the plain. That tree, which seemed harmless, caused a terrible sorrow when Hoth took a shot. Balder's brother was born soon thereafter. He was Odin's son. He took vengeance while just one night old. He had never washed his hands nor combed his hair when he put Balder's killer on the funeral pyre. Frigg whelped in Fensalir for the woe of Valhalla. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? I saw a prisoner lying in a certain wood, the liar himself, none other than Loki. There sits Sing, his wife, although she finds no glee in her husband. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? A river falls from the east, full of daggers and swords, through valleys of poison. It is named Slith. There stands north of the dark valleys a golden hall of the kin of Sindri, and another stands at Okelnir, the beer hall of a giant named Brimir. I saw a hole that stood far from the sun, on the beaches of corpses. The door faces north. Drops of poison fall through the roof. Its walls are encircled by serpents. I saw oath-breakers wading in those thick streams, and murderers, and those who seduce others' lovers. There Nidhogg sucks the corpses of the fallen, snaps them in his jaws. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? In the east sat an aged giantess, in ironwood, and there she raised Fenrir's brood. Among them is a certain one, who bites the moon in a troll's shape. Dead men feed their lives to the wolf. The home of the gods turns red with gore. The sun shines black through the summers. The weather is never cheerful. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? A giant, a herder by trade, sits there on a burial mound, striking a harp. He is the cheerful Egthir. A bright red rooster named Fjalar sings near him in Birdwood. Near the Aesir sings the rooster named Goldencomb. He wakes the men who fight for Odin, the lord of battle. But another sings below the earth, a soot-red rooster in the halls of hell. Fenrir howls terribly. Before the doors to hell, the wolf will break its bonds and run. I know much wisdom. I see deep in the future, all the way to Ragnarok, a dark day for the gods. Brothers will fight one another and kill one another. Cousins will break their peace with one another. The world will be a hard place to live in. It will be an age of adultery, an age of the axe, an age of the sword, an age of storms, an age of wolves. Shields will be cloven before the world sinks into the sea. There will be no man left who is true to another. The giants are at play, and the gods' fate is kindled at the blast of the Yalahorn. Heimdall blows that horn hard, holds it high aloft. Odin speaks with Ymir's head. The old tree sighs when the giant shakes it. Yggdrasil still stands, but it trembles. Fenrir howls terribly before the doors to hell. The wolf will break its bonds and run. I know much wisdom. I see deep in the future, all the way to Ragnarok, a dark day for the gods. Hrim advances from the east, with a shield before him, and the Midgard serpent in a monstrous rage. The serpent beats the waves, and the eagle screams eagerly, splitting corpses with its pale beak. Nalgufar, the giant ship, is released. That ship sails from the east, bearing giants over the sea, and Loki is its captain. The giants are coming, together with Fenrir and Loki too. What news from the gods? What news from the elves? All Jotunheim is roaring. The Aesir are in council, and the dwarves, creatures of the mountains, tremble by their doors of stone. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? Surt comes from the south, with a bright light in hand. Yes, the sun shines upon the sword in his grasp. The mountains collapse, the trolls fall, men walk the roads to hell, and the skies divide above. Then comes the second sorrow of Frigg, when Odin goes to fight the wolf, and Frey goes to fight the giant Surtur. Then Odin, Frigg's husband, will fall to Fenrir. Then comes the great son of Odin, Vitar, to fight. Then comes the great son of Odin, Vitar, to fight, to avenge his father on the wolf. He shoves his sword into the mouth of Fenrir, all the way to the heart, and thus Odin is avenged. Then comes Thor, Earth's son, Odin's son, to fight the Midgard serpent. The protector of Midgard will kill Jormungand in his rage, but all humankind will die out of the world when Thor falls after only 9 steps, struck down by the venom of the honorless serpent. The sun turns black, the earth sinks into the sea, the bright stars fall out of the sky, flames scorch the leaves of Yggdrasil, a great bonfire reaches to the clouds. Fenrir howls terribly before the doors to hell. The wolf will break its bonds and run. I know much wisdom. I see deep into the future, all the way to Ragnarok, a dark day for the gods. And that is where the tale of Ragnarok ends. In the stanzas that follow, the soothsayer details what happens after. The Aesir meet once again, and they tell stories of the great events of Odin and the wisdom. Then they will find the world once more in a great place. Fields will bear great harvest. Baldur will come back. Hoth and Baldur will live in their father's halls, and the other gods that remained will come around. Yet, the story ends rather darkly. It ends with these words. Then the dark dragon will come flying down from the dark mountains, the glistening serpent. Nidhogg will bear corpses in his wings as he flies over the valley. Now I must retire. It ends establishing a new threat. Or maybe not. Maybe Nidhogg is fleeing. The context is somewhat missing, as everything the soothsayer says is very much a convoluted mess of prophecy and typical mythological shortcoming. Now, with a slightly greater insight into the actual wording of what Ragnarok will be like, I hope you have a better understanding. And I hope you look forward to those games where you're either picking up after Ragnarok or causing it yourself. And until next time, stay curious.